August 2009. Suddenly overhead came the whir of swooping helicopters. Yellow liquid tear gas rained down, burning the protesters' eyes. Riot police stormed into the crowd swinging batons. The vicious crackdown of a labor protest horrified the public and haunted the writer-director Hwang Dong-hyuk. It would become one of his many inspirations for his series Squid Game. In September 2021, Netflix released the South Korean-made thriller Squid Game. Through 9 episodes, the show tells the violent tale of a group of 456 indebted, desperate societal misfits recruited into a competition by a mysterious organization. During the contest, the players compete in various children's games. If a competitor loses, they die. The last contestant left standing wins 45.6 billion won, or around 38.1 million USD. The dystopian story, which critiques South Korean society and capitalism, struck a chord with audiences. Within the first month of Squid Game's release, approximately 142 million households across the world streamed the show. Since then, the show and its actors have won multiple awards and accolades. The show has spawned 1,000 memes and has cemented its place in pop culture history. Also, perhaps in the most ironic turn of events in modern media history, Netflix is working on a reality show where contestants will compete in Squid Game-type events to win a jackpot. The protagonist of the show is middle-aged everyman Gi-hoon. He once had a stable job as an auto worker at Dragon Motors, was laid off, and has struggled to make ends meet ever since. One result of his instability is that he's losing access to his young daughter. In Episode 5, A Fair World, Gi-hoon watches his fellow competitors turn on each other in a violent free-for-all. This causes him to flash back to a labor strike at Dragon Motors, which is brutally ended. This is a direct reference to the Ssangyong Motors strike, an event which actually happened in South Korea. In the spring of 2009, Ssangyong Motors filed for bankruptcy. As a result, the company was restructured and over 2,600 workers were laid off. However, the Korean Metal Workers Union, KMWU, felt the company manipulated accounting practices to push the bankruptcy through to be able to sell off technology to the detriment of the workers. During trial, a South Korean appeals court noted that the company had exaggerated its financial crisis and didn't try to save the jobs of its workers. In fact, during receivership, the company continued to lay off workers, eventually laying off 43% of the staff. The KMWU and other unions called for a strike. For 77 days, over 1,000 auto workers protested in the summer heat, holding up signs and chanting slogans. All they wanted was their jobs back. Instead, the government brutally ended the protest. There was a lot of fallout from the strike. Several protesters were detained and brutally interrogated. When they were eventually released, the protesters were blacklisted from being employed at other large Korean companies. Also, Ssangyong Motors sued several protesters in civil court for damaging the company. The company won, and the auto workers were forced to pay large fines. Most of them didn't have the money. Under Korea's harsh anti-union economic damage laws, the workers' assets, including their homes, were forfeited. Another heavy influence threading its way through Squid Games is American imperialism. After several years of gunboat diplomacy, in 1883, Korea signed a peace treaty with the first American diplomatic envoy to visit the country. This was rapidly followed by an agreement that allowed for the flow of goods between the two nations. During this time period, Korea was lagging behind in terms of modernization, and as a result, many hoped that this deal would allow Korea to catch up with the West in terms of technology. However, in reality, Korea got the short end of the stick. In 1910, the U.S. stood by as Japan annexed the Korean peninsula. Outside of some minor trading, successive U.S. governments ignored Korea until the last days of World War II. At that point, the U.S. wanted control of Japan's former colonies to limit the growth of the Soviet Union and expand U.S. imperial outreach in Asia. Ultimately, the USSR and the U.S. agreed to have the Japanese forces surrender in Korea. Also, the country would be partitioned along the 38th parallel. The North would be under Soviet occupation and the South under U.S. occupation. Two superpowers with different ideologies split the country into two. In Episode 7, VIPs, foreign VIPs visit the island to bet on which competitors win and die. The VIPs speak English and are portrayed as Americans. The fate of the competitors is simply entertainment for them. The VIPs don't care about the needs or survival of the contestants. While the competitors are given just enough food to survive, the VIPs are treated to a lavish meal served by men and women wearing only body paint. One of the VIPs orders a server to provide him with sexual favors. The servers might as well have been slaves owned by the VIPs. The colonial mindset of the VIPs echoes what was done to Korea. This sentiment regarding the division of Korea and foreign imperialism is further explored in Episode 9, One Lucky Day. In this episode, Detective Jun-ho searches for his missing brother on the island where Squid Game is being run. He is tracked down by the frontman, the head staff member in charge of the Squid Game. Shockingly, The frontman is revealed to be his brother Hwang In-ho. The brothers have a brief standoff and In-ho tries to recruit Junho. He refuses. In-ho shoots him in the shoulder, causing the detective to fall over a cliff edge and into the sea, reflecting the brother versus brother conflict of the Korean War. The Korean War, which took place between 1950 to 1953, pitted the socialist state of North Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea against the capitalist southern state of the Republic of Korea. Families were split apart and sometimes fought on opposing sides of the war. The split between North and South Korea was also explored through the character of Sab Byok. She enters the contest with the dream of reuniting her family. She's a refugee who defected from North Korea with her brother, leaving the rest of her family behind to deal with the consequences of her escape. Her baby brother is stuck in a children's welfare center in South Korea. Since the end of the Korean War, only a handful of people have actually managed to get out of North Korea alive. Some 70 years later, families are still separated. During the search for his brother, Junho disguises himself as one of Squid Game's staff members so he could search the complex. In a file room, he discovers information about the games. One file reveals that the Squid Game event began in 1988. The 1988 Olympics, which were held in Seoul, Korea, were seen as a triumph for the country. The Korean War plunged South Korea into poverty. For the first decade after the war, North Korea thrived, trumping the South in terms of economic growth. In the early 1960s, 40% of the South Korean population still lived in terrible poverty. Through a series of authoritarian governments promoting spending programs, international loans, and various economic-driven policies, South Korea greatly improved its GDP. In a single generation, the standard of living significantly rose within the country. Hosting the Olympics in Seoul was a chance for South Korea to show that it had finally arrived on a world stage. However, the brightly colored pomp and pageantry of the Games hid a horrific secret. Since the late 70s, the South Korean government had rounded up undesirable citizens, the homeless, street kids, the disabled, and relocated them to camps. These relocations accelerated in the few years before the Olympics as South Korea beautified its cities to provide illusions of economic modernization on the international tourists who would be visiting. In these camps, the inmates were subject to beatings, starvation, and slave labor. Products including clothing, shoes, and ballpoint pens were made by unpaid or poorly paid inmates. These items were shipped around the world, and camp owners as well as government officials profited. Worst yet, many inmates were subjected to horrific conditions. Beatings, assault, and malnutrition were common. When the inmates died due to poor treatment, records were falsified. A few months before the 1988 Olympics, one of the worst camps was raided. Over the next few years, the camps would finally close. But to this day, survivors are still haunted by the memories of the horrors they endured. As recently as 2017, the Korean government refused to open an investigation to look into these horrible institutions, knowing that government officials would be implicated. Officially, the death toll stands at around 500, but it's unknown how many people died in these camps due to the falsification of death certificates. Often, other inmates were forced to secretly bury bodies in unmarked graves under cover of night. The inmates were considered expendable and only good for their cheap labor by the people who ran the camps. This is not unlike the organizers of Squid Game, who exploit the desperate poor who were once on the margins of society. One theory discussed on message boards about the show is that one of the main reasons the government turns a blind eye to the Squid Game competition is because it rids society of undesirable citizens without the government having to spend money. Despite Korea's massive economic growth since the Korean War, the country has still suffered when international financial downturns occurred. Director Hwang was also inspired by these crises, including the 2008 Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, which led to a worldwide recession. At the time, Hwang was working on a film but couldn't get financing. He didn't work for about a year. Also, his recently retired mother and grandmother ended up being forced to take out loans. As a result, they were eventually forced to go back to work. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OCED, a group of developed countries with high-income economies, South Korea topped a list of 33 countries for elder poverty. In Squid Game, both Gi-hoon and Sang-woo's mothers, who are both past retirement age, are forced to work in menial jobs to survive. Another reason why Squid Game made such a hit is society's current feeling of unease surrounding financial matters is the background to our current economic situation. After the 2008 recession, Korea eventually rebounded. However, like many developed economies, the country suffers from income inequality, which grows worse by year. Household debt is soaring. Many in the middle class feel squeezed and struggle to hold on to financial stability. In fact, Squid Game uses a statement from a real-life news report in its season finale. A news anchor says, "In this country, household debt is on the rise, topping the global average. It's the biggest increase in the world besides China due to lifted government restrictions on financial loans." This news report was actually made not long before COVID hit. The pandemic has only exacerbated the financial uncertainty that many Koreans feel. The bright color palette and unique character costumes of Squid Game are inspired by a wide range of historical events, media, and fashion. The now iconic green tracksuit of the competitors were inspired by the green gym uniform that Hwang wore as a preteen in school. In the 1970s, President Park Chung-hee launched a political initiative called the Saemal-undong Movement or New Community Movement to modernize the South Korean rural economy. The community-driven development tried to address the rising imbalance in the standard of living between the rapidly industrializing urban centers and the impoverished rural villages. The Saemal movement took principles from historical Korean communalism called Haengyak and collective agricultural operations called Dura. Central to the program was promoting ideas of diligence, self-help, and collaboration. The Saemal emblem was a green flag, with a yellow orb containing a green sprout at its center. Each day, schools would begin their mornings with a daily exercise drill to the tune of Saemal-undong's campaign song. The lyrics had a bootstrap message encouraging physical strength, which was likened to national and economic power. The children wore identical gym uniforms as they exercised. The new community movement was a mixed bag. It succeeded in improving living conditions in some rural areas, but there was also corruption within the program. The downsides didn't end there, as the program promoted the destruction of traditional religious and regional practices, as well as the persecution of non-conforming citizens in the name of modernization. There's irony in the way Squid Game references the movement through green tracksuit-wearing competitors. The Saemal movement encouraged collective struggle to achieve advancement. In Squid Game, the competitors can only work together on a limited basis. Ultimately, it's a zero-sum game, and there can only be one winner. At the same time, wearing tracksuits promotes a certain lower-class status in contemporary Korean culture. In the 1970s, many Koreans wore modest traditional clothing. Owning a Western-style tracksuit indicated that the wearer lived in a major metropolitan area, where Western clothing was beginning to take root. As capitalism progressed, Western clothing continued to be adopted. Koreans rapidly became accommodated to Western fashion culture. Tracksuits became something you wear while exercising. Today, many associate them with baksu, which is slang for being unemployed. The term translates to white hands, suggesting that the lazy or idle days make for shamefully clean palms. In fact, low-end tracksuits worn outside of a gym are a common trope of Korean pop culture. They're often associated with undisciplined or disorderly people who are on the margins of society. Originally, the director wanted the masked Squid Game guards to look like Boy Scouts, but when testing the designs of the uniform, thought that they showed the male figure too well, which allowed viewers to individually recognize guards. Hwang felt that the guards should be like ants in a colony, anonymous workers simply doing their jobs, part of a hive mind. After going through several designs, production settled on the hot pink hooded uniform and black masks that bears either a triangle, circle, or square symbol for game staff. The uniformity of the look creates a lack of individuality and personality, while the playful bright shade of pink contrasts the dark, callous nature of the job. The masks themselves were inspired by fencing masks and halhae-tal, or traditional Korean masks. Halhae-tal are considered a national treasure. They date back to the 12th century and were worn by actors during ritual dance dramas, portraying the facets of human character and social dynamics. The shape on the masks distinguished the hierarchy of the staff. Everyone is a faceless worker drone, but some of them are more important than others. Workers wearing masks with squares on them call the shots and are the bosses over the others. Staff wearing masks with triangles on them are designated as the armed soldiers. And finally, all the worst grunt work, such as removing dead bodies, is relegated to those wearing masks with a circle marking. All the pink jumpsuit workers answer to a higher boss, the frontman. The black mask of the frontman is distinct from the other workers' masks. Hwang said that it pays homage to Darth Vader. The VIPs wear bejeweled or shiny animal masks, which show them to be very powerful animals and represents their elite global status. Currently, director Hwang is hard at work on the second season of Squid Game, which is likely to premiere in early 2023. Fans are eagerly anticipating the show's return and have lots of theories as to what's going to happen. Perhaps Junho survives being shot and falling from the cliff. Does Gi-hun participate in the competition once again, sabotaging it from the inside? What historical references will underscore the second season storyline? If you like this video, you should watch What Would Happen in a War Between the US and North Korea, or check out How Much Your Life Will Cost from Birth to Death.